This is Module 1 video for Lessons 12 and 13, comparing and ordering decimals. We're going to first review how to compare and order whole numbers. So we're going to look at the two numbers up here above our line because we're using just these two for now. I want to compare these two. In order to compare the two numbers, I should line them up by their place values, one on top of the other. So I'm going to take the first number, and underneath it I'm going to write the second number. So their place values are lined up. Everything in the thousands place is lined up with everything in the thousands place. And I start with my place value all the way to the left, which in this case is my thousands. They both have a 3, so they're equal. Then I go to my hundreds, and in this case the 7 is bigger than the 6, so it tells me that this number, 3,764, is greater. Many of you can figure out which number is greater, but you have a difficult time when it comes to placing the symbol in. So when we place the symbol in, we have to make sure that Pac-Man is always eating the bigger number. So I check the larger number and I remind myself that Pac-Man is going to eat the bigger number because he is hungry. You can call it an alligator mouth, you can call it a Pac-Man, whichever you prefer. So here's the bottom one. We're going to line these numbers up like we just said. So we have 455,792, and we're going to line up the place values right above it. At quick glance, someone might think that these two numbers are equal, but when you start to look at it, you will realize they're not. The 4s in the 100,000s place are the same. The 5s in the 10,000s place are the same. The 5s in the thousands place is the same. The 7s in the hundreds place are the same. And then I get to the 10s and the 9 is bigger, so it tells me that that number is greater. And since this number right here is greater, 455,792, I make my alligator mouth or my Pac-Man facing that number because it will read 455,792 is greater than 455,729. Once again, we have whole numbers. This time they're going to ask me to put the numbers, there's more than 2, in order from least to greatest, which means that I want my smallest number to my largest number. The other thing that they might ask me, sometimes they might use the phrase to put it in ascending order. That means it's going up, above. That's why I try to tell people to remember the A. Ascending order is that we're increasing. Those are all words that might be used. Just like we said before, we're going to line them up. I'm going to look for my smallest number first. So when I look in this column, I have 2 7s, I have a 3, and I have a 4. So I know 347 is my smallest. So I'm going to write 347 is less than. It's my smallest number. So the alligator's not eating it. And we put symbols in between. So now I go back, and then once again I look in the hundreds place. I have a 7, and a 4. So I know the 4 is the next one. So I have 437 is less than. So now we're going to look at these two numbers. These two 7s were the same. So we're going to go to the tens place. We have a 4 and a 3. So we know that 734 is smaller. And then it is less than 743. Now I'm going to go back and I'm going to check that 347 is smaller than 437, is smaller than 734, which is smaller than 743. We do the same thing with decimals. Now we're working with decimals, and when we work with decimals, first thing we do is we line them up by their place value. By their place value means that we use our decimal to line them up, but do not, if you're asked to explain how you do it, do not say I lined up my decimals. You are lining up your place value. So here's my first number, 346 and 8/10. And underneath it, I'm going to use my decimal to help me, but I'm lining up my place values. Anywhere where I do not have a digit above or below, I'm going to fill in with a 0. And now I can start checking. So even though one number might have more digits, it doesn't mean that it's greater. We have to look at the values. So right here, we look at the hundreds place. One has a 3, one has a 0. So I know that this one over here is larger, so I make sure that I put my alligator mouth facing it. Next, we're going to line up these two. We have 74 and 3/10, and then we have 74 and 36 hundredths. So even though this number right here has more digits, we cannot assume it is greater. We have to fill in our zeros for any missing number. So we start at our 7s, they're the same. We go to our 4s, they are the same. 3s are the same, and then we come over here, and the 6 is greater, so my alligator would eat this way. Last question. On this page, we're going to line them up. Many of you would tell me that the bottom number is greater because it has 4 digits, and the top one only has 3, and that's not true. So they both have a 7 in the tens place, a 9 in the ones place, a 2 in the tenths place, and then I look in the hundredths place. I have to fill in my other missing digit, which would be a 0, and in this case, when I look at it, these two numbers are equal. Now, when we are putting our decimals in order, before we said it could say least to greatest, which would be smallest to biggest, or in ascending order. So in this case, I line them all up. I'm going to erase that and give more room for it. I didn't put in enough room. And now, as I stated before, we're going to fill in zeros wherever there are no digits. It will make it easier for me to compare and put them in order. So now I look here. We want the smallest number first. So we're looking all through here. There's 3 zeros and a 7. So I go to the next column, and I want to see which of the zeros has a small number. So that very first one right there is the smallest. So I would write my number, my original number, not the one that I filled the zeros in. It is the smallest. Now I go back and I look at my zeros again. The 7s over here match. Then the 5s match. The 4 does not. So the 2 is smaller. So then I write that number. And then my other one that's a 0. And the last one down here. And then I look to make sure that 7 and 542 thousandths is less than 75 and 24 hundredths, which is less than 75 and 42 hundredths, which is less than 754 and 2/10. We're going to do one final one. This time I'm going to ask you to do greatest to least. And here we're going to make sure that we have the biggest. And we would call this descending, going down the D. So we're going to line them up. We're going to fill in our zeros. And now we're going to continue. So we have 3s and a 0. The 3s are bigger, so now I'm only going to look at the 3s. I have a 5 and a 4. So this number is my largest number, 356 and 8/10. This time I have to say that it's greater. So I go back to my other 3. I have that one, which is 346 and 97 hundredths, which is greater than 7 and 834 thousandths. So I'm going to look through them, and if I notice they're all in the correct order, and that's how I compare and order decimals. The most important thing from this lesson is that you have to line up your numbers using their place value, and in order to do that, you can use your decimal to line them up.